Before there was royalty, before the Netflix deals and global headlines, Meghan Markle was just another actress grinding in Los Angeles trying to land roles and stay relevant. She wasn't a duchess. She wasn't a humanitarian brand. She was Meghan, ambitious, charming, and according to some, always calculating. And at the center of this lesser-known version of her story stands Trevor Engelson, the man who didn't just know her, he married her. Trevor isn't some bitter ex lurking in the shadows. He's a Hollywood producer, well-connected and respected in his own right. When he met Meghan in the early 2000s, she was still finding her footing in the industry. They clicked instantly. For 6 years, they dated, supported each other, and eventually tied the knot in 2011. From the outside, it looked like your typical LA love story. Two creatives making it work. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming quietly, slowly, and with surgical precision. Friends of Trevor described their marriage as oddly one-sided. Trevor was Alan. He flew out to Toronto regularly when she booked suits, sent care packages, even looked into relocating his work just to be closer. Meghan, she started pulling away. No fight, no cheating scandal, no dramatic blow-up, just distant. The kind that doesn't come from space, but from strategy. And when she was finally ready to cut the cord, she didn't pick up the phone. She mailed back her wedding ring. Literally. No goodbye, no explanation, just a package with finality written all over it. Now here's where it gets messy. Trevor wasn't just hurt. He was confused. He'd been told certain things during their marriage, intimate things. One of the most shocking, Meghan reportedly told him she couldn't have children. For a couple planning a life together, that's a monumental confession. And Trevor, being in love, accepted it, adjusted to it, believed it. Only years later, when Meghan and Harry announced their pregnancies, did Trevor feel the full weight of that earlier conversation. He didn't storm the media with outrage. He didn't release angry statements, but he talked to friends quietly. And what he shared painted a version of Meghan that didn't line up with the polished public figure we're all used to seeing. According to his inner circle, Trevor felt duped, not because Meghan moved on, but because the truth, whatever it really was, never felt like it belonged to both of them. People close to Meghan insist that medical circumstances change, and they do. That's not the point. The point is that Trevor felt deliberately kept in the dark about something that shaped their entire future. And that sense of betrayal didn't just come from a relationship ending. It came from realizing that maybe it had all been transactional from the start. What's even more chilling is how seamlessly Meghan transitioned out of his life. While Trevor was still processing what had happened, Meghan was already brushing shoulders with Hollywood elites, slipping into circles that would eventually lead her to Kensington Palace. It was like watching someone hit a switch and become an entirely new person. Trevor, meanwhile, stayed quiet. No book deal, no Oprah interview, just whispers. He even toyed with the idea of creating a show loosely based on his story. A man whose ex-wife marries into the royal family. It never made it past the concept phase, but the idea itself that said plenty. He had a story, one that echoed with disappointment, confusion, and maybe a little truth people weren't ready to hear. When Meghan started appearing in headlines as Prince Harry's girlfriend, Trevor Engelson wasn't surprised. It was more like a weird déjà vu. He'd seen her climb before. First, it was small roles in television, then Suits, then slowly leveling up her circle. He used a joke that Meghan was the type to skip rungs on the ladder instead of climbing one by one. Except now, the ladder led straight into Buckingham Palace. People around Trevor say he was never jealous. It wasn't about Harry. It was about the pattern. Meghan always knew how to be exactly what someone wanted until she didn't need them anymore. And it wasn't just Trevor who noticed. Friends from her early days in L.A., former colleagues, even assistants. More than a few have quietly admitted that Meghan had a knack for transforming herself depending on who she was with and what the moment required. She wasn't fake. She was adaptable. Too adaptable. The version of Meghan that Trevor fell in love with was warm, driven, and vulnerable. She'd vent about rejection, question her talent, cry over bad auditions. Trevor carried that version, the one without glam squads or security details. So when she suddenly became this refined, press-savvy global figure, people who knew her before couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, not because she evolved, but because she never looked back. And then came the claim, the one that shook everyone who'd followed her story, even slightly. Meghan had allegedly told Trevor during their marriage that she couldn't have biological children. It wasn't mentioned casually. It was, for what Trevor shared with friends, a defining part of their relationship. They had, he believed, accepted a different future. So, watching her become a mother or two later with glowing magazine covers and royal photo ops, it didn't just catch him off guard. It broke something in him. He never accused her publicly. He never dragged her name. But the confusion, the ache of having planned your life around a truth that might not have been real, that was hard to shake. And it wasn't just about kids. It was about trust. Trevor had spent years thinking he understood the woman he married, only to realize she might have seen him as a stepping stone. That's not easy to admit, let alone process. Meghan's defenders are quick to say that medical realities can change, that maybe she believed what she said at the time and maybe that's true, but it still left a wound because if someone says I can't give birth, and you accept that, build your life around that, love them through, that then find out years later, it wasn't the whole story that messes with your sense of reality. It wasn't just Trevor asking questions. Industry people, those who knew both of them, began whispering they remembered how quickly Meghan had moved Dee on how effortlessly she'd rebranded from struggling actress to royal renegade. And while public sympathy focused on the racism and media harassment Meghan faced, which was real and ugly, it didn't erase the trail of people she seemed to leave behind without a second glance. One producer who'd worked with her years ago summed it up perfectly. Meghan was always 5 steps ahead. Charming, yes. Smart, very. But if you weren't part of the plan, you weren't part of her future. That kind of ambition doesn't make someone evil. But it does raise questions, especially when someone like Trevor, who never cashed in on his past with her, suddenly opens up. He didn't need to go viral. He didn't need fame. He already had success, which made his story even harder to ignore. He wasn't selling bitterness. He was just finally speaking what had been sitting in silence for far too long. The silence that followed Trevor's quiet revelations didn't last long. Meghan's camp scrambled. Damage control meetings were held. Calls were made. According to insiders, she was furious, not just at Trevor, but at her own team for letting the past slip through the cracks. She'd worked years to perfect her image. Philanthropy, fashion, feminist messaging. It was all curated down to the last detail. And now here came a ghost from a chapter she thought she'd buried, threatening to pull the mask off in front of the whole world. She wasn't screaming on social media or putting out official statements. That's not her style. Meghan's strength has always been optics. Appear calm, appear controlled. Smile in the face of chaos and act like you're above it. But behind closed doors, sources say she was livid. Staffers were being grilled about leaks. Her inner circle was put on lockdown. And perhaps most telling, she began floating legal threats. Not against Trevor directly. He hadn't broken any law, but against tabloids and blogs picking up the story, hoping to stop the wildfire before it burned too hot. But there's something different about this time. This isn't just another salacious headline. It hits deeper because it didn't come from an anonymous source or some random royal biographer. It came from a man who shared her life when no one else was looking. The man who saw her before the spotlight hit. Trevor's words don't feel like gossip. They feel like a mirror. and the timing couldn't be worse. Public opinion on Meghan has shifted drastically in the last couple of years. What began as overwhelming support has grown increasingly divided. The Netflix docu-series, the Oprah interview, the royal family feud. It all started to feel like a never-ending PR campaign. Audiences that once saw her as a victim now questioned if there was something more performative at play. Trevor's version of Meghan isn't that of a cruel villain. It's more complicated than that. It's someone who's intensely driven, deeply image-conscious, and willing to make hard cuts if it means moving forward. That kind of personality thrives in Hollywood. But when you marry into royalty, the expectations are different. People want transparency, tradition, even humility. Meghan tried to rewrite those rules. For a while, it worked. But every rewrite has an editor, and sometimes the past shows up with red ink. What stings the most for people watching this unfold is the contrast. Meghan speaks often about kindness, healing, and being misunderstood. She paints herself as a woman who values honesty and loyalty. But if Trevor's account holds even a grain of truth, it challenges that narrative. Can someone preach about vulnerability while discarding those who knew their rawest self? Prince Harry has remained silent. The palace predictably hasn't said a word. But make no mistake, they're all paying attention. This isn't a tabloid story they can brush aside. It's personal, and insiders suggest even Harry was caught off guard by what Trevor revealed. The question now isn't whether Meghan told the truth back then. The question is, who is the real Meghan Markle? It's easy to applaud reinvention. People evolve. But when every reinvention leaves someone hurt, confused, or cast aside, eventually people start connecting the dots. Trevor Engelson may have only shared a small glimpse, but it was enough to disrupt the image. Not destroy it, but crack it. And once there's a crack, the shine never looks quite the same again. In the end, the truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just whispers from the people who knew you best and walked away without a story to sell. Till one day, they speak and everything changes.